of my paper were developed from 4 main points. The first being Leviticus 19:18, which Jesus refers to in the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke. And it says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." The next point is the acts of inward and outward prayer. Then Pope Francis's Laudato Si, which I just found out is actually celebrating its 1-year anniversary, and also Franciscan creation theology. So Leviticus 19:18 commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, has had many different interpretations. Originally, when it was interpreted by old Jewish traditions, it was interpreted to mean just loving thy Jewish neighbor. Rhea was the word that was used in Hebrew for neighbor, and many believe that it meant just Jew, because the definition of Rhea originally interpreted as a fellow man who believed what you believed in, who you were not waging war against, hence fellow Jew. After many interpretations starting in the 1700s, and then also when Jesus reinterpreted in the Gospels, neighbor became to mean loving thy fellow creature or loving thy fellow man. The newer interpretation is due to the fact that many started believing that all of humanity was God's creation and therefore everybody was their neighbor. And also due to, in Matthew chapter 20, verse 9, when Jesus says to his disciples that you have heard from the Pharisees that you should hate your enemy and love your neighbor. But then he reinterprets the Leviticus law to mean completely loving each other, not just the person that is living right next to you, not just the person who shares the same traditions as you. I focused a lot on prayer throughout this entire paper due to the idea that prayer is a loving act, both inwardly and outwardly. Inwardly, for more so yourself, building a relationship with God. John H. Wright said that those who pray and are heard are described as those who know thy name and put their trust in thee. So building that relationship with God, really knowing him and trusting him, knowing his will, and then being able to build relationship with others through prayer and intercession, that is another inward form of prayer that one can experience. And this is really seen in cloistered communities. Cloistered communities are religious life usually consisting in the Catholic Church, and they are communities that remove themselves from the world so that way they can pray for the world and truly know God's will for the world. Claire of Assisi, who was one of the founders of Cloistered Life for Women, wrote letters to one of the women who was just starting to become a sister with one of her orders, Agnes of Prague. And she described the relationship that she could attain with God through prayer as one being of marital union. However, I don't believe that prayer is just inward and it's just intercessing and just words that we say to God or silence that we sit in with God. I believe that it also consists of an outward prayer or prayer without ceasing. These are made up of gestures, which John Wright again says are gestures, whether social or individual. They give us deep insight into the nature and character of prayer. If we simply avert to the significance of those gestures and attempt to decode them. So these gestures, if they're deeply rooted within that intercession that you've been praying with those words, if you move those intercessions into actions, then they become something even more significant, not just words that you're spouting out. They truly allow God's will to come through fruition. They're not just sitting there stale. Laudato Si was a really big inspiration for this paper. I am a huge follower of Pope Francis, growing up in the Catholic faith as well. And his idea behind taking the poor and the environment and finding the connections between the two and how we have to care for both of them is very important to me, being an environmentalist and somebody who loves helping out with the poor. Pope Francis, in part of his encyclical, was describing the situation that the world of consumerism has put the poor in. He said that even as the quality of available water is constantly diminishing, in some places there is a growing tendency, despite its scarcity, to privatize this resource, turning it into a commodity subject to the laws of the market. Yet access to safe, drinkable water is basic and universal human right, since it is essential to human survival and as such is a condition for the exercise of other human rights. Due to our 21st century consumerism, our lack of care for the world that we live in and for the people who share this world with us, there are large corporations who are taking this source of water from those who need it. That is not just hurting the poor, but that's also hurting the environment, because that is taking something that should be not a commodity, not sold and given away, but something that should be free for everybody. And that is the view that the world has on environment a lot. But also, when you look at environmental issues or issues with the poor, a lot of people see it as two separate things. They see, oh, Sarah McLachlan's commercial for saving the dogs, but then they're on the whole other side, there's a totally other, deeply touching commercial about the poor kids in South Africa. Those two commercials, both important, need to find a way to come together, and Pope Francis in his encyclical gives us a way to do that. At the end of his encyclical, he gives us two different prayers, and there was one prayer that really sparked my attention, and it was a prayer for our earth. In the prayer, he prays, bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. These two prayers serve as Pope Francis's call to action at the end of his encyclical. They not only ask God for help for the world, but they also describe to us how each person can help the world as well, the actions that each of us need to take by softening our hearts, reaching out to the other, trying to make sure that we are not personally destroying or polluting the earth that God has given us. Finally, we have Franciscan creation theology. Blair did talk a lot about Francis and his issues with PTSD, but he is known in the Catholic Church for being the patron saint of nature. But he really wasn't just the patron saint of nature, he was the patron saint of creation, I believe. And creation is defined as relationships between human and non-human, created order, the place of the human person within that order, and the response of the person to the created order in its relationship to God. So creation is not just nature, which I believe a lot of people have that misunderstanding when they hear creation. They're like, oh, well, that's just like trees and birds and things like that. It's all of us together in a harmony. Many others feel that the earth isn't their home, and that's another reason why there's a lot of difficulty in expressing the importance of taking care of the earth. A lot of Christians see the earth as being their temporary place until they make it on to heaven, and I believe that a lot of other religions also see that as what earth is, and so they don't treat it the way that they think that a home should be treated. However, in a Franciscan creation theology book, they defined home as not simply a place to sleep or eat, or to be physically sustained, but rather to be at home is to experience freedom and love. Where one loves, there one is free and at home. If we can truly say that we love our parents, our siblings, our cousins, our best friends, our husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, whoever, how can we not say that we are not at home? If we truly have this love and this freedom to act within this love here on this earth, how are we not at home? Finally, in Franciscan creation theology, a lot of it is based off of the canticle of the sun or the canticle of creation. Though a lot of it is Francis just exalting the praises that he sees within nature, it is really more of a reflection of how nature praises God in this more perfect way than we could ever understand, because before the fall, nature and humanity were one together in perfection, but then after the fall, humanity became imperfect, and though nature does suffer an imperfection due to a lot of humanity's actions, there is belief that nature still possesses this perfect praise of the Lord, and so we see that, and we are called to become one in harmony with that praise, with creation. I did another paper on the harmony of the cosmos and all that great stuff, but it was talking about how the cosmos, it really has music, and it's creating music, and unless we pause to listen to that music, we will never be able to truly be one with creation and one with its creator. So finally, that brings me to the call to action. We must first respect all creation, that is both the environment and those who live here on this earth. We should not just respect those who are more influential, who can get us the best job, but those who really need to be loved and cared for. And that is, again, said in Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si'. Then we need to build relationships with God and His community. We have to take time to pause, to reflect on that harmony, and to really just see creation as entirety for what it is, just this beautiful song of God and this beautiful praise of God. We must love others, not trying to convert them to our own faith, but just truly loving them and being there with them. I had the opportunity to be at an interfaith gathering at the Islamic Center in Daytona Beach, where there were Muslim, Jewish, and Christian religious groups all together in one building. And I saw a Catholic priest and an imam hug and say, "Hey, I've got your back." Neither one of them were trying to convert each other to each other's religion. They were just caring for each other and being there with each other. Finally, we can pray with Francis and Francis. So Pope Francis ends his encyclical with the two different prayers. One specifically for Christians becoming one in union with creation, but then also for all of the world to really care for the earth. We can reflect on those prayers that he most willingly gives us, and the encyclical is something that is for public access. You just have to type in Laudato Si' or even Pope Francis's encyclical. It's pretty popular. And you'd be able to find those prayers very easily. Again, they're at the very end of that encyclical. And then we can also reflect on the canticle of creation, the canticle of the sun. This canticle, again, is a beautiful exaltation of the praise that creation gives to God, creation together in harmony. In conclusion, I believe that through inward relationships and intercessions and outward gestures and prayer, we can fully love God's creation, which is formed through humanity